Greetings and welcome back to another episode of 1320 Time Stream. This is Alea Eternal. Okay, so here we have our Yellow Warrior Wave spell. We're on the 8th day, getting into that last half of it in the Galactic Tone, which is going to be the Galactic Night. So before talking about it, let's take a look at it. And then we'll get into our breath. Okay, and the breath for this one is going to be in our left shoulder, in our right next to baby finger. Right next to baby finger, left shoulder, in breath. Begin. Okay, getting into the Galactic Tone. Galactic Tone, it's interesting when we take a look at the resonant tone, which is kind of channeling energy. We can kind of, it's like I gave a bit of a description yesterday in yesterday's video about what I kind of see like a channel looking like in some way. And it's almost like this kind of like energy vortex that's kind of like coming down from above kind of thing. And not that that's actually how it is, but that's kind of an image that comes to mind for me. And so to me, it's a very easy descriptor for getting into the galactic tone. And so it's almost like every one before number 7, like all the tones on the right side of your body are kind of like representing kind of like the earth in some way. And then the rest of them are kind of representing more like higher, more cosmic archetypes. Like, let's take a look at that. We have galactic, solar, planetary, spectral, crystal, and cosmic, which is interesting. And before that, we have magnetic, lunar, electric, self-existing, overtone, and rhythmic. And while a lot of them can really just feel abstract, I kind of get the feeling that that's what we're doing a little bit, is on the left side of the body, the joints, we're kind of getting into a little bit more of a galactic and I want to say off-world, because when I talk about galactic, I'm not necessarily talking about space. A lot of people feel the galaxy and space are actually the same thing when they're not. The galactic energy, and this is why I find it so appropriate to talk about like harmonize, model, and integrity, the 3 words representing the galactic tone, is because in the galactic essence, what you have is something that is in harmony with itself. So, to the point where the kind of cosmic, spatial, galactic picture that we have is this vast network of suns and stars and whatnot spattered across the kind of sky, or this, plausible picture of like vast darkness with all these little lights in it, and maybe some nebulas, or those fancy kind of NASA art kind of photos. And it's like, while that is a quality of it, I don't feel that it really sums up what the galactic energy truly is. Because I find when we talk about galactic culture or evolving and meeting our galactic family, a lot of people, this brings up the idea of we're going to get into starships and we're going to blast out into the night sky, very much like Star Trek. And while this is awesome, I feel there's a lot more realistic, plausible embodiment to explain galactic culture and our connection to the galaxy. And where I see this going is that as we find our integrity, we find our code of conduct, it's like this structure that when we align that structure with other structures that have similar integrity, we create this alignment or bonding force known as harmony. And so this harmony creates like a syncopathic field. And that syncopathic, that empathic, that telepathic field is a way that energy and information moves very directly. And so we're talking about galactic consciousness as like an ascension to fourth, fifth dimensional kind of ways of information flow. And so while there's this spatial dynamic of externalization, when we're talking about ascension, we're talking about embodiment, very much like we talked about yesterday. And so as we're talking about ascension, we're not talking about just kind of, vaporizing and turning into light and just never to be heard from again because it just, completely defines the boundaries of the human mind or whatever. I feel more like what's being shared yesterday is that we're embodying a much greater depth and nuance to our senses, sense extension, and we're beginning to embody so much that the idea of galactic culture is that in a galactic constant, while there is the out there, that out there is in here. And so all of those out there things like the stars and the planets and all the star systems, they have relevant kind of like neural net behavior or emotional imprints or all these kind of things. And with the galactic consciousness, we can also begin to see that everything in outer space, everything in the galaxy is actually present here on Earth. Not as like, there's a little bit of physically everything. And that's the whole thing is like, I keep diving back into this simple principle of helping gather your consciousness from objectivity in the reference points of creativity. That's kind of like, in some way, what makes this all very difficult to embody or comprehend is that we have been taught to objectify all phenomena. We have been taught to place everything outside of ourselves and then place everything outside of everything else. And kind of this spatial dynamic. But not everything works like that. In fact, nothing really works like that. Everything is only modeled through how we model it. So things work by how we model it. And so another part of the galactic tone, which I find becomes readily available, is the kind of galactic architecture. And so there's an architecture of creation. And so this architecture of creation also begins to make itself present, and that is like galactic consciousness, because we're talking about something that is, otherworldly, but when we're talking about otherworldly, we're not necessarily talking about a neighboring planet. We're talking about another world, and a world is not necessarily a planet. A world is, however, a amalgamation of different reference points and value systems that creates a harmonically attuned integrity. And so going into the galactic tone, we get to really dip into a little further about how all this kind of stuff really works. As well as, 13 points for Galactic Federation and all that epic star stuff that we've been seeing throughout our whole lives. That's also really fun too, and is also part of that archetype. So I'm not throwing that away, I'm just reeling back in the awareness cultivation from being hyper extended and hyper cultivated into that continuum, so much to forget about these things that we are only just developing. To give them more space, we may have to kind of go back into our origins or into some of our kind of kindergarten thinking or feeling mechanisms to allow different things to grow from a more primary source within us. So the Galactic Night is really interesting. I find the night is representing, diving into that darkness, diving into that void. It is the waking dreamer. And so in many ways, it's like we're diving into this opportunity, this portal. And today we're also actually a galactic activation portal as well, just because it is the Galactic Night. And so it all kind of aligns of this time to dive into like the collective unconscious and find something incredibly new, and to go into those emotions and to go into those things and get the reminder of where we're supposed to truly be. And also as we continue to get that reminder, that's that intuitive self-realization that's showing us like, hey, there's these other things that are really going on as well. And as we take days like this, moments like this, to go deeper, to allow ourselves to probe deeper, then we can find different aspects of ourselves and different aspects of this co-creation that we're sharing. Regular life is simply regular life, and it is stable enough to allow ourselves to remove ourselves from it and rediscover what life and what reality really is. And that being said, I find the night also really holds the keys to our abundance. It really holds the keys to how we can really gain access to that unlimited nature, that freedom, that flow of energy that we could be considered abundance. And how we have the kind of like intentional, integral cultivations that help us really sustain that energy. And so it's like today is that day where we're sustaining, bringing into integrity those fundaments that we find by going out there into that darkness. We're fulfilling the dream, we're fulfilling that abundance kind of energy. So yeah, I'm going to leave that there. Oh, actually, there's another thing. Today is the second of the first moons of 2012. And so also representing the root chakra. And so yesterday we had the crown chakra and the first moon, and today we have the root chakra and the second moon. So this is the second of 7 moons that represent kind of how we're going into the new world. And so yeah, embody it and find yourself in this moment. Find yourself in this really special time, and have fun with it. Rebirth yourself, and yeah, feel free to create. Much love. Stay tuned for the affirmation section of today's episode.